we're going back to the ox, and we're going to stay with the ox actually for nearly 2 more chapters. So we're going to go through all different kinds of brain teasers related to the ox, or more than one ox, maybe. I suppose, why is that? Well, the ox is the archetypal creator of damage, because of course it moves. If it's known to be dangerous, then there are aggravated damages. It's mentioned in Torah, although the pit is also mentioned in Torah. So, and we'll learn about the pit a bit at the end of the 5th chapter. But the ox really captures the attention of the Mishnah. So we're gonna deal with just one little brain teaser today about the ox, but we will deal with many, many more brain teasers like this one in coming days. Sure, shenagach l'arba'a chamisha shvarim ze achar ze. So this ox is actually gored 4 or 5 other oxen. It must have gone on a rampage. So it's gored 4 or 5 other oxen, one after the other. So these are not simultaneous. So in other words, by the time it injures the second, the first is already injured, and so on. And so on right down the chain. And we are going to assume, by the way, that all these oxen which were gored belong to different people. So there are different claimants for damages. So what are we going to do? I mean, does, for example, the owner of the first ox get most of the damages and then pass what is left down the chain? That might be one rational way to divide up the damages. And the Mishnah is going to give us 2 slightly different ways of computing the liability. Interestingly, they all seem to benefit the person at the end of the chain rather than the one at the beginning. But we're going to start off with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So let's just review the Mishnah. An ox has gored 4 or 5 other oxen, one after the other. And the Mishnah says very clearly, Yeshalem la'acharon shebahem. He shall pay to the last one of them. So the Mishnah actually makes it pretty clear that it's the claimant at the end of the chain that's going to have priority. And maybe there'll be some surplus. Maybe there'll be enough value left in this goring ox to pay off other claimants. Well, let's find out. Im yesh bo motar. If there is a surplus, so if we've paid off the last guy and there's a surplus, yachzir shel fanav, we're going to return it to the previous one. Ve'im yesh bo mutar yachzir li shel fanav, and if there's still surplus, we're going to return it to the previous one. Ve'acharon niskar. The last one, the last guy injured, is the one who benefits. That is if you like, the anonymous opinion of the Mishnah, but in this case, we're attributing it to Rabbi Meir, who is, by tradition, the author of every anonymous opinion in the Mishnah. Divrei Rabbi Meir. And why are we doing this? Why are we going right to the end? Well, the Gemara explains, even though this Mishnah is given in the first opinion in the Mishnah is given in the name of Rabbi Meir, the Gemara says we're following Rabbi Ishmael. Amar Rava le'olam k'Rabbi Ishmael. Rava said, actually, this Mishnah follows Rabbi Ishmael. Amar ba'alei chovot ninhu, who says the injured parties are creditors. So the injured parties have the status of creditors, effectively a bit like the owner of the damaging ox owes them a debt. And then the Gemara goes to say, so what are we dealing with here? Because if they're creditors, right, they would all have equal claims. If they're all creditors, why should one of them take more damages? So what are we talking about here? B'maya skina. Kagon shetafso nizak ligboa hemenu. The one person, this must be the first person, grabbed it. The first person that was injured, or the owner of the ox that was injured, grabbed this injuring ox. Tfaso, it grabbed it. Because the first person damaged grabbed this ox in order to essentially claim his debt, secure it in order to claim his debt. And he became like a paid custodian with regard to its damage. If the status of someone who takes an object in lieu of a debt is like that of a paid custodian, and a paid custodian is actually responsible for the damage that the object in its custody does. So just keeping that in mind, now let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah rules, Yishalem l'Acharon shebahem, the last one gets paid out. And if there's surplus, it goes back up the chain. Well, what we're saying is that, gosh, the first person who was injured, well, fine, he's got a claim. He's got a claim on the owner of the ox, but he's actually taken possession of the ox to work off his claim. So he's now responsible for further damage which this ox does, and so on right down the chain. So the second to last person in the chain actually owns the ox. He's the final one who sees the ox. And the last person damaged can then claim half damages from him. So that's Rabbi Meir, according to the Gemara, in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. That's one way we can look at this problem. Let's look at it another problem, which might actually be a little bit more in tune with the way we've seen damages work out. Because we've already said if this ox is not known to be dangerous, then the two parties are going to sell it and split its money. V'chatzu et kaspo. V'et kaspu yechatzun. They're going to split the money. And that feels a bit like, assuming that the carcass is worth nothing, assuming it feels a little bit as if they're partners in the live ox. So your ox injures my ox. If my ox is not worth anything on slaughter, then effectively the only funds left are the value of your ox. We're going to split that in two. So it's a bit like we are partners in the live ox. Let's now see how it goes. Rabbi Shimon Omer. So Rabbi Shimon says, Shor shoveh matayim she'angach l'shor shoveh matayim. So an ox worth 200 zuz gores an ox worth 200 zuz. So classic example. By the way, it gives you a sense as to the value of an ox. In the time of the Mishnah, I think the value of the rental of a courtyard for a year is about 200 zuz. So it's a substantial sum. It's also the value of the minimal value of the ketubah. So an ox is a valuable beast. So the ox worth 200 zuz gores an ox worth 200 zuz. And the carcass is not worth anything. We're going to make a really simple calculation here. This person takes a money and this one takes a money. In other words, and a money is 100 zuz. So in other words, they're partners. And the Gemara makes this clear, actually. The Gemara, again in Bava Kama, says, Atan Rabbi Akiva de Amar Torah de Shutfa Hi. We arrive at the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who say that the ox is shared in partnership. So they each take 100 zuz worth, a manez worth of this ox. What's going to happen next? So it then went and injured another ox worth 200. Ha'acharon notel money. Ve'shel fanav ze notel 50 zuz ve'ze notel 50 zuz. So it injures another ox worth 200. This ox is still worth 200. So the last one takes 100. And the two previous guys, well, they were partners in an ox that was worth 200. But hang on, this ox is only worth 100 now because it's paid out 100 in damages. They're liable for 100 in damages. There's only 100 zuz of value left. So they're both going to take 50. They're both going to take 50 because they are partners in the ox. And the last guy injured is going to take 100. So that's how we're going to split up the value of the ox. That's when it only gores two people. What if it gores a third one? Chazar, v'nagach l'shur acher shoveh matzayim. So it then injured another ox worth 200 zuz. Acharon notel money. The last one takes 100. Same situation. Your ox is gored by a 200 zuz ox. You're going to have value for half that animal. So acharon notel money. The last one takes 100 of money. Veshlevanav 50 zuz. The guy behind has 50 zuz. He still has his 50 because he's still got a half share in what is left. Ushnaim harishonim dinar zahav. And the first two get a gold dinar, which is 25 zuz. In other words, the first two get 25. So we are effectively we're following the model of partnership, but we're dividing the proceeds up the chain one by one.